Every year, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the world hushes. Cars stop. Children pause. Old men place their hands over their hearts. Why? Why do we grow still for something we've never seen? Why do tears gather for faces we never knew? This is not just a day. It is a question wrapped in silence. A memory louder than sound. Before we begin this journey together, take a breath, and if you wish to walk with me through history, through memory, honor, and quiet gratitude, subscribe now, and let the story unfold gently. Because some stories deserve to be remembered, even in the dark, especially in the dark. Veterans Day began not with parades, but with quiet. At the end of World War I, when guns finally fell silent, people felt something sacred in the hush. That silence was more than relief. It was remembrance. From that stillness, a tradition was born. First called Armistice Day, it marked not just peace, but the price of it. But how did a single silent moment become a nationwide tradition? What journey did this day take, from the muddy fields of Europe to the hearts of American families? Let's return to where it began, to the day the world stopped and listened. It was not just a date. It was a promise. On November 11th, 1918, at 11:00 a.m., the guns finally fell quiet across Europe. Soldiers looked up from trenches, hearing only the wind. Birds returned, and the earth, soaked in years of thunder, breathed again. This moment, this hush, was not just the end of war. It was the beginning of memory. In America, news of the armistice crossed the sea like a wave. People poured into streets. Bells rang. Flags waved. Strangers hugged, danced, and wept together. But beneath the joy was something quieter, a knowing that so much had been lost, and that silence had weight. Even celebration carried shadows. And so the memory began, not just of victory, but of cost. One year later, on November 11th, 1919, President Woodrow Wilson declared the first Armistice Day. It was meant to honor peace. But the silence at 11 a.m. that day said more than any speech could. In schools, churches, town squares, people stopped, listened, remembered, and in that stillness a tradition was born, one that would grow, shift, and echo through generations. They called it Armistice Day, a name that whispered peace instead of proclaiming war, a name that carried hope even in mourning. But it was more than a label. It was a seed, planted in memory, growing each year with silence, with flowers, with folded hands. And with every passing November, more hearts joined the stillness. The silence of Armistice Day echoed across generations. Grandfathers told quiet stories. Children held hands during ceremonies. Photographs yellowed, but names stayed bright in memory. For some, it was a day of sorrow. For others, a time to honor strength. But for all, it was a day to remember. And that remembering became a ritual passed down like a folded flag. Just 2 decades after that first silent morning, the world trembled again. A second war, even larger and darker, would test the meaning of peace and stretch the memory of Armistice Day. Could 1 minute of silence hold the weight of so many new losses? The story of remembrance was far from over. World War II reshaped everything, including how we remember. When it ended in 1945, the silence returned, but this time it was heavier. More names, more families with empty chairs, more photographs folded into wallets and tucked into drawers. The minute of silence still stood, but it trembled now. It was asked to carry twice the weight, hold twice the pain. And people wondered, could one day, one pause, truly hold space for it all? Still, they paused. Because sometimes silence is the only thing loud enough to remember everything. By the early 1950s, voices began to rise. Armistice Day was no longer enough. It spoke only of the First World War, but now millions had served in a second. Veterans, groups, families, and leaders asked, what about them? What about Korea? What about tomorrow's soldiers? The nation needed a day not only to honor peace, but to honor the people who fight for it, no matter the war, no matter the decade. A new idea began to take shape. Not a replacement, but an expansion. One silence for many names. In 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the change. Armistice Day became Veterans Day. It was no longer only for those who served in World War I, it became a day for all who had worn the uniform. From the trenches of France to the beaches of Normandy, from frozen Korean hills to future fields unknown. Veterans Day would now carry every name. And as the ink dried on the proclamation, the silence remained. But now it echoed with more voices. Not just one war, not just one moment. A new name, a wider memory. November 11th, 1954, the first Veterans Day. Ceremonies echoed across the country, but now the words spoken reached farther. They carried new names, new wars, new scars. Old soldiers stood next to the young. Flags waved above generations, and beneath the speeches, beneath the trumpets, a familiar stillness lingered. Because even with the new name, the old silence remained. A silence that now held more than memory. It held unity. The tradition was reborn, not as something new, but as something bigger. A single minute that stretched to hold an entire nation's gratitude. As the years moved forward, Veterans Day moved with them. Through the Cold War and Vietnam, through Desert Storm and Afghanistan, the silence continued to speak. Each November, schools taught, parades marched, families remembered. It became more than a holiday. It became a heartbeat, steady, patient, resilient. Even as the faces changed and the battles shifted, the meaning deepened. Because remembrance is not only looking back, it is choosing not to forget. And that choice is made every year by millions in quiet ways. Now, over a century since the guns fell silent, the story of Veterans Day continues. New voices rise, new questions form. How do we honor in a digital age? What does service mean to a generation raised in peace? And how do we carry a tradition forward without letting it fade? The silence remains, but it waits for new meaning, new guardians. And so we turn the page, from origins to evolution, from memory to meaning. What symbols came next? What rituals kept the heart of this day alive? Let's walk forward. No holiday begins as a holiday. It begins as an idea. In the early days after the First World War, that idea was simple. Remember, not just victory, but the people who made it possible. Civic groups, churches, schools, they all took part. Some held the ceremonies in the rain, others rang bells. All paused. The silence was growing. The question was, how do you give it shape? What started as a moment was now becoming something more. A tradition, a ritual, a need. And so the conversation began. Should this be official? Should this be forever? Long before Congress made it law, the people made it real. Local communities embraced Armistice Day on their own. Town by town, state by state, the traditions took root. In one city, schoolchildren placed flowers at monuments. In another, old veterans gave trembling speeches in front of dusty courthouse steps. No single script, just shared memory, just gratitude. And slowly, across the vast American landscape, the silence began to link one town to the next, until it became clear this wasn't just local anymore. It was national, whether the law caught up or not. The call for a national holiday grew louder, not from officials, but from the people. Veterans organizations, local leaders, families of the fallen. They wrote letters, held marches, lit candles in windows. Their message was clear. This silence matters. This day matters. They weren't asking for a day off. They were asking for a day of presence. And over time, their voices gathered like a drumbeat. Soft at first, then steady, then impossible to ignore. America was listening, and Washington would soon have to answer. In the quiet of the White House, letters piled up. They came from mothers, from mayors, from veterans who had buried their friends in foreign soil, all asking for the same thing, a day of recognition that would last beyond memory. President Calvin Coolidge listened. Though silent and reserved, he understood the weight of honor. In 1926, he issued a proclamation asking Americans to observe November 11th with ceremonies and reflection. It was not yet a law, but it was a signal. The silence was now official, even if unofficially so. Coolidge's proclamation didn't mandate silence. It invited it. He asked schools to pause. He asked churches to ring bells. He asked people to stop, remember, reflect. And across the country, they did. The words weren't laws, but they echoed like sacred instructions. They gave form to something invisible. November 11th began to feel different. It wasn't just another day, it became a ritual, even without force, even without punishment. Because sometimes all it takes is a suggestion spoken with respect. Even as the ceremonies grew and the silence deepened, the day remained unofficial. Year after year, people asked Congress to take the final step, to turn remembrance into law. But the halls of government moved slowly. Some feared turning emotion into legislation. Others questioned if it was necessary at all. Meanwhile, the people kept pausing. They didn't need permission to remember. But the question lingered. How long must a nation wait to see its heart recognized in ink? The silence was still there. But now it was expectant. In 1938, 2 decades after the guns went silent, Congress finally acted. With quiet ceremony, they passed legislation to make Armistice Day a national holiday. It was to be a day to be dedicated to the cause of world peace and to be thereafter celebrated. The law carried no fireworks, no grand promises, just the weight of recognition. At last, the silence had a date. At last, remembrance had a home. And as the president signed the bill into law, a nation exhaled. Some wept. Others simply stood still. And the bells rang again. A law may mark a day, but people give it meaning. After 1938, November 11th carried new weight. Stores closed. Schools held assemblies. Flags flew at half-staff. And yet, what made the day sacred was not what was said, but what was felt. Each family remembered someone. Each town carried stories. Each silence, no matter how short, was full of names. This was no ordinary holiday. It was living memory, woven into parades, prayers, and pauses. And, as more years passed, more people joined the silence. Not just because the law said so, but because their hearts did. Just a few years after Armistice Day became law, the world was at war again. World War II erupted with a fury that made the first look small, and with it came new sacrifices, new heroes, new graves. Americans served on beaches, in skies, beneath oceans, and those who returned came home to a holiday that no longer felt wide enough. Armistice Day still stood, but its walls were straining to hold a deeper grief. The silence, once a whisper for one war, now trembled with many voices. Could one day truly carry them all? After World War II, the meaning of Armistice Day began to stretch. It was still a day of peace, but the memories were no longer limited to the First World War. New generations had served, and more battles had been fought. Some questioned whether a single moment of silence was enough. Others felt the rituals growing too broad, too diluted. But even in uncertainty, the core remained: remembrance. The holiday stood like a quiet monument, worn by time but unbroken. And behind closed doors, leaders began to ask, should this day change? Should it evolve? By the early 1950s, the shift was already in motion. Public discussions turned toward renaming the day, not to erase the past, but to include the present. Not just armistice, but veterans. Supporters argued that all who had served deserved this honor, not only those from one war. They believed the silence should widen, should carry more names, more stories, more decades. Opposition existed too. Those afraid that broadening would blur the day's meaning. But in homes and hearts, the word veteran was already louder than armistice. The nation was ready, even if the nameplate had not yet changed. In the end, it was not protest that changed the name. It was quiet persistence. Bills were introduced. Speeches were made. And finally, in 1954, the change was signed into law. Armistice Day became Veterans Day. A new name, but the same silence. A new title, but the same heartbeat. Now, all who had served, no matter the war, no matter the year, would be honored under the same sky. And so the day stepped forward, from memory to presence, from peace to gratitude, from one war to every warrior. And yet, what symbols would now carry this broader meaning? Let's look closer. It began with a poem. In the fields of Flanders, where poppies bloomed among graves, a Canadian soldier named John McCrae wrote words that would outlive him. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row. The red poppy became more than a flower. It became a symbol of blood, of beauty, of remembrance, worn on jackets, placed on wreaths, folded into silence. Even today, long after that war ended, the flower still blooms each November, quiet, small, and powerful. It reminds us, remembrance is not always loud. Sometimes it's a single petal. 13 folds, each with meaning. The American flag, when folded in ceremony, becomes a triangle, like the tricorn hats worn by soldiers of the Revolution. But it's more than history. It's a ritual. Each crease is slow, deliberate, silent, a language of respect. When the flag is handed to a grieving family, it says what words cannot. It carries a nation's gratitude. It turns cloth into memory. And though the hands that hold it may tremble, the folds remain strong. A flag, folded right, becomes something more, a final salute. It is only 24 notes. No lyrics, no applause, just a trumpet, a pause, and a hush that falls like dusk. Taps began during the Civil War, but over time, it found its way into every military funeral, every memorial, every November 11th. It does not shout, it does not explain. It simply speaks through silence. Even those who have never served often find their eyes wet when the final note fades. Because that sound is not just for soldiers. It's for anyone who's ever said goodbye and hoped that silence could hold love. At many tables across America, there's a chair that no one sits in. It stays empty on purpose. A quiet symbol for those who never came home. Sometimes there's a candle beside it. Sometimes a small plate or a folded napkin. And always a pause. It reminds us that freedom has a cost, and that some are missing not just from parades, but from dinners, birthdays, and walks in the park. The empty chair doesn't ask for attention. It simply waits, and in its stillness, it says everything. One of the most solemn symbols stands without a name. A pair of boots, a rifle pointing down, a helmet resting on top. This battlefield cross isn't about glory. It's about goodbye. It began during wartime as a way to mark fallen comrades when there was no time for headstones. Now it stands in ceremonies across the country, often surrounded by silence, sometimes by tears. It's not just military gear. It's a human form made from absence. A way to honor the space someone once filled. And in that shape, we remember what was given and what was left behind. Not all symbols are objects. Some are gestures, the snap of a salute, the removal of a hat, the way a crowd grows quiet before the anthem plays. These moments are brief, but they hold the weight of generations. No one needs to explain a salute. It is its own language, one of respect, duty, and memory. On Veterans Day, these gestures bloom across the country like invisible flowers. Simple, human, powerful. And when paired with silence, they become sacred. Because remembrance does not always shout. Sometimes it simply stands at attention. Every year, Streets across America transform. Floats roll, bands march, flags wave. But at the heart of every Veterans Day parade is something deeper. The rhythm of boots on pavement, the stillness of onlookers, the children waving, unsure why they feel like crying. Veterans don't march for show. They march for memory, for those who cannot walk beside them. And as they pass, each salute, each cheer, each tear in the crowd becomes a thread in a national tapestry of gratitude. The parade is not the celebration. It is the procession of remembrance, woven with every step. In classrooms across the country, Veterans Day is more than a date. It's a story shared. Students trace flags, listen to guest speakers, and ask quiet questions. Did it hurt? Were you scared? Why did you go? And veterans often softly answer, not with grand tales, but with simple truths. It's in these rooms that the meaning of the day is passed on, not by textbook, but by voice, by presence. Because remembrance must be taught, and the earlier it's planted, the deeper it grows. All across America, monuments rise from the ground. They do not move, they do not speak, but they remember. Granite walls, bronze statues, names carved like echoes into stone. People come with flowers, with fingers tracing letters, with memories too heavy to hold alone. Veterans Day ceremonies often begin here, in front of the unmoving, where silence speaks the loudest. Because sometimes, to honor the past, we must simply stand still. And in that stillness, history breathes. No matter where you are in America, at a school, a store, or a stadium, on Veterans Day at 11 a.m., something happens. Everything stops. It's just 60 seconds. But in that 1 minute, time seems to stretch. The air feels heavier. The world grows still. This silence is not emptiness. It is full of memory, of names, of gratitude unspoken. Some bow their heads, others place hands on hearts, some simply breathe quietly. And when the minute ends, the world resumes. But something remains, a gentle echo, a sacred hush that lingers. Veterans Day is not just in parades and ceremonies. It lives in small things. A note on a neighbor's door. Thank you for your service. A child's crayon drawing left at a grave site. An old photograph placed gently on a mantel. These gestures don't make headlines, but they matter. Because remembrance isn't measured in noise. It's measured in sincerity. Every smile, every nod, every whisper of thank you adds to the meaning of this day. And together, these quiet acts build a culture of gratitude, one small kindness at a time. Symbols change. Ceremonies evolve. But remembrance stays. From flowers to flags, from salutes to silence, each act holds a story. Each one connects us to those who gave. But what of the voices behind the medals? What of the people who wore the uniforms? To truly understand Veterans Day, we must go deeper, beyond the ritual, beyond the ceremony, into the hearts of those who served. Let us listen, not just to the day, but to the people who carry its meaning. What do veterans themselves remember? Let's hear their voices. Veterans Day honors millions. But how often do we hear their voices? Behind every salute is a story. Behind every medal, a memory. And behind every silence, something waiting to be shared. Some veterans speak freely, others hold their words close, but all carry something: joy, grief, pride, regret, moments that changed them forever. To understand Veterans Day, we must step beyond the uniform and into the life beneath it. Because to truly remember, we must also listen. For many veterans, time doesn't erase. It reframes. They remember the weight of their gear, the sound of boots on gravel, the way a friend laughed right before things changed. Not all memories are of battle. Some are of kindness, a shared meal, a letter from home, a sky full of stars that reminded them of childhood. And some memories arrive at night, uninvited. These stories don't always fit in parades or ceremonies, but they live within each veteran, shaping how they walk, how they pause, how they love. And on Veterans Day, they rise quietly to the surface. Sometimes, when a veteran speaks, their voice shakes, not from fear, but from weight, from holding in stories too long. They speak of friends who never came home, of choices made in seconds, of things they saw that never quite let go. These words don't come easily, but when they do, they carry more than history. They carry truth. And those who listen, truly listen, walk away changed. Because the stories of veterans aren't just about war. They're about what it means to be human in the hardest of places. Not every story is heavy. Some veterans carry memories of laughter in the darkest places, a prank in the barracks, a song sung off-key before dawn, a joke that made everyone forget, just for a moment, where they were. These moments matter. They are the proof that humanity endures, even in war. That, even surrounded by chaos, the heart still finds a reason to smile. And when veterans remember these moments, their eyes light up. Their voice softens. They become, again, the young men and women who shared that laugh. On Veterans Day, we honor those stories too, the ones filled with life. For many veterans, nothing meant more than mail. A letter touched by a loved one's hand became a lifeline. Inside, photos, jokes, tiny updates from a world that kept spinning. Some read their letters slowly, saving every word. Others folded them carefully, tucked close to the heart. And sometimes, in quiet moments, those letters came back out. Creased, smudged, loved. On Veterans Day, some veterans still carry those pages, not because they need the words, but because they remember how it felt to be remembered. Some veterans never speak of their service, not because they forget, but because the memories are too deep for words. They might pause during a national anthem, or tear up during a parade, or simply stare out the window when no one is watching. Their silence isn't absence, it's presence. They carry entire chapters inside them, written in emotion, in memory, in moments that words can't hold. On Veterans Day, we honor not only the voices we hear, but the ones we don't. Because some stories are told not aloud, but in the way someone stands, or breathes, or quietly remembers. Every veteran has a name, and behind that name, stories, sacrifices, years of life lived in ways most will never know. On Veterans Day, people often say, "Thank you." But what if we also said their names? What if we looked, truly looked, at their faces? A name can be etched on a wall, but it can also be held, remembered, and spoken aloud. To honor someone deeply is to see them fully. And when we speak a veteran's name, we remind them and ourselves that they are not invisible. Some veterans never wrote their stories down. Instead, they told them, quietly, to children on porches, to friends around fires, to partners late at night. These stories weren't always linear. They came in fragments, a smell, a sound, a lesson wrapped in memory. And slowly, they became part of the family. A thread passed through generations. Veterans Day isn't just about remembering those who served. It's about carrying their stories forward. Because someday it may be you, sitting with a child, passing along the sound of a voice that once shook and then grew strong. What does it mean to serve? Every veteran answers differently. For some, it was duty. For others, family. For some, it was survival. For others, identity. There is no single reason, no single story, only a shared thread. They showed up. Veterans Day invites us not only to thank, but to ask, to listen, to learn. Because the deeper we understand why they served, the more deeply we honor how they lived. And that question, what does it mean to serve, is one we should never stop asking. Coming home is not the end of the story. For many veterans, returning means learning to live again, to shift from orders to choices, from formations to freedom. Some return to hugs, others to silence. Some find their place again quickly, others search for years. But all return carrying something invisible. On Veterans Day, we honor not just the ones who served overseas, but the ones who came back and kept serving, as parents, neighbors, mentors, friends. Their stories don't stop at the border. They begin again, quietly, bravely, here at home. Veterans don't stop serving when the uniform comes off. They serve in schools, hospitals, shelters. They volunteer, mentor, lead. Some help fellow veterans heal. Others fight for rights and remembrance. Some just listen, because they know how much that matters. Veterans carry a legacy of service that continues to ripple long after the last mission ends. On Veterans Day, we honor not only the service behind them, but the service they still give. Because true service doesn't end. It simply changes shape. We've heard the voices. We've walked the memories. We've stood in silence. But what happens after the stories? How do we honor not just the past, but the journey that follows? As we turn the page, we move into the shadows, the part of the story many don't see. The struggles, the wounds that don't bleed, the nights that don't sleep. To truly honor our veterans, we must go there too, with compassion, with honesty, with open eyes. Let us step carefully and bravely into the quiet after the uniform. Some wounds are easy to notice, others are not. A missing limb can be honored with a medal. But what about the nightmares? The jump at sudden sounds? The quiet stare into nothing? PTSD has many faces. It whispers in the dark. It walks beside veterans in grocery stores, traffic jams, and crowded rooms. It's not weakness. It's memory, too powerful to let go. On Veterans Day, we must remember not only the visible scars, but also the silent ones, because some of the hardest battles are fought long after the war ends. For some veterans, sleep is no refuge. The body rests, but the mind replays. Dusty roads, distant cries, a flash of memory that startles them awake. These nights can feel endless, and yet many never speak of them. They rise in the morning, smile, work, care for others. They carry the night inside them, quietly. Veterans Day isn't only about medals and marches. It's about understanding the quiet endurance so many show. Even when the world forgets, their nights remember. War does not end with peace. For many veterans, memories return when least expected. A scent, a sound, a silence too deep. They carry these memories in their body, in their breath, in the way they look at the world. Sometimes they smile at nothing, remembering a lost friend. Sometimes they grow distant, chased by something only they can see. This weight is not weakness. It is what remains when a person has seen too much and still chooses to walk forward. On Veterans Day, we honor that walk. Scars don't always heal clean. Some veterans live with pain that lingers, aches in old wounds, nerves that misfire, limbs that no longer move the way they used to. Their bodies remember what their minds try to move beyond. Even years after returning home, a step may falter, a breath may catch, a movement may bring back a memory. But through it all, they keep going. Because resilience is not about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about carrying it and walking anyway. Veterans Day is a moment to see those steps and to honor everyone. For many veterans, the hardest part isn't what happened overseas. It's coming home and feeling out of place. The pace is different. The language, too. Things that once felt familiar now seem strange. There's a wall between experience and explanation. And sometimes it feels like no one's on the other side. Veterans Day is a chance to soften that wall, to ask, to sit beside, to simply be there. Because every veteran deserves to feel that they belong, not just once a year, but always. Not every veteran asks for help. Many wait, some too long. But when help arrives, real help, patient help, compassionate help, it can change everything. A counselor who listens, a friend who notices, a stranger who reaches out. Healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet moment when someone says, "I see you." Veterans Day can be more than memory. It can be action. Because honoring service also means showing up for those still carrying the weight. Some veterans become warriors of another kind. They take what hurt them and use it to help others. They speak at meetings, fight for care, show up for someone in crisis at 2 a.m. They know the language of pain, and they turn it into protection. These quiet advocates don't wear capes. They wear scars and purpose. On Veterans Day, we honor not just those who served in war, but those who kept serving afterward, in hallways, hospitals, shelters, and hearts. There is courage in combat, and then there is courage in confession. When a veteran finally speaks about what they've carried, the silence breaks open. not to erase pain, but to give it space to breathe. Each story told opens a door for healing, for hope, for others to follow. And often, what begins with one trembling voice becomes a room full of nodding heads. On Veterans Day, may we create those rooms. May we listen when the silence finally speaks. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry the past differently, to walk with it, not under it. For many veterans, that journey is lifelong. There are good days and hard ones, steps forward and steps back. But still, they walk. Some find peace in community, others in art, in prayer, in planting gardens, in telling their story at last. The path isn't straight, but it moves. And on Veterans Day, we don't just thank them for where they've been. We walk beside them wherever they're going. Even in the hardest moments, there is light. Sometimes it's a laugh shared with an old comrade. Sometimes a sunrise after a sleepless night. Sometimes it's a stranger who says, "Thank you," and means it. These moments don't fix everything, but they remind veterans they are seen, known, remembered. The shadows of war are real, but so is the light that breaks through. Veterans Day is that light, not just in parades, but in presence, in listening, in being there, and in the quiet promise, you are not alone. If this part of the journey moved you, share it, not for numbers, but for voices. Somewhere, a veteran is watching. Somewhere, someone is remembering. And somewhere else, someone is still silent. Your comment might be the bridge. Your share might reach a voice not yet heard. Let's carry these stories farther, gently, boldly, because remembrance is a flame, and you are the one holding the match. We've walked through shadows. Now, let's step into the light of return, of reintegration, of the long, quiet journey home. Because life after service is more than survival. It's a new story waiting to be written, a story of reconnection, of rediscovery, of purpose found not in orders, but in choice. In the next chapter, we'll follow veterans as they leave the battlefield behind and begin the work of becoming whole again. Let's walk beside them. There is a moment many veterans remember forever. The first step back inside their home. The door opens. Familiar walls, familiar smells. Yet nothing feels quite the same. The war stays behind, but not completely. Some of it arrives with them, invisible in their suitcase. Re-entry is not just physical, it's emotional, mental, spiritual. To return is not to resume, it is to begin again. And on Veterans Day, we honor that quiet, brave beginning. In the military, days had structure, orders, routine, purpose. At home, the clock ticks differently. The world is softer, slower, and at times more confusing. Some veterans struggle to find rhythm again. Tasks feel unfamiliar. Emotions shift quickly. There is freedom, but also a loss of clarity. Reintegration takes time, and patience, and grace. On Veterans Day, we remember that coming home isn't a finish line. It's another kind of journey, one that deserves just as much honor. To blend in, some veterans wear a different kind of uniform. They smile when expected, shake hands, attend meetings. But inside, they may still feel like a stranger, as if the world has moved on without them, and they are learning it all over again. This mask is not deception. It is survival, a way to cope while healing. And on Veterans Day, we must look past it, to truly see the person behind the performance. Because belonging shouldn't require pretending. It should begin with being understood. When one person serves, the whole family serves. And when one person comes home, the whole family begins again. Spouses may feel like strangers. Children may not understand. Roles have shifted. Emotions are complex. Love is there, but sometimes buried beneath exhaustion, fear, or misaligned expectations. Healing happens together. It takes conversations, patience, and the small act of simply showing up. On Veterans Day, we remember that homecoming is not just one step. It's a path walked by many feet. Some veterans return with edges, sharp from war, dulled by grief. Trust doesn't return overnight. Loved ones may feel unsure. Veterans may feel distant. But with time, through meals, shared moments, quiet kindness, trust begins again. It doesn't require grand gestures, only the willingness to try, again and again. Veterans Day is not just about honoring the service, it's about honoring the slow, sacred act of rebuilding what was paused. And that work, too, is heroic. Not everything makes it into words. There are moments veterans carry silently, some out of pain, others out of love, trying to protect those they care about. They laugh when they don't feel like it, nod when they want to scream, pretend to sleep to avoid the questions. But behind that silence is still presence, still effort, still love. And sometimes all it takes is a hand held a little longer. a space left gently open. On Veterans Day, we hold space for what cannot be said, but is still deeply felt. In uniform, there was mission, clarity, a clear sense of why. After the service, that clarity can fade. Some veterans search for new purpose, for work that matters, for roles that feel meaningful, for something to anchor them again. This search is not aimless. It is sacred. Because purpose is not just about achievement. It's about connection, belonging, a reason to rise each day. Veterans Day reminds us that honoring someone means supporting their search, not just celebrating their past. Civilian life moves fast. Emails, traffic, small talk. For some veterans, it feels like being dropped into a race already halfway run. They may struggle with social rules, crowded places, or conversations that seem too shallow after everything they've seen. But with time, many find their stride again. And in doing so, they bring a depth, a steadiness, a wisdom the world needs. On Veterans Day, we honor not just the transition, but the quiet leadership that follows. Some veterans find their new purpose in unexpected places: a classroom, a nonprofit, a garden, a workshop. They take the discipline, resilience, and leadership learned in service and apply it to build, heal, teach, create. Their mission continues, just in a different uniform. And often, what they give in this next chapter is just as powerful as what came before. Veterans Day is a time to see all of it, not just who they were, but who they are becoming. Some of the strongest support comes from those who've walked the same path. Veterans understand one another in ways no book or counselor can teach. They laugh at the same stories, know the same nightmares, share the same scars, and the same stubborn hope. These peer bonds often become lifelines. On Veterans Day, we honor not just individual strength, but the strength found in brotherhood, sisterhood, and shared survival. If you've walked this journey with us, take a moment to like this video, not for the algorithm, but as a quiet nod to every veteran who has taken one more step forward. Each like is a candle lit, a message sent, a way to say, "We see you, we walk beside you," because remembrance is more than memory, it's movement, and this movement matters. The homecoming journey never truly ends. It bends, evolves, and unfolds across time. In the next chapter, we'll explore how service continues in new forms, how veterans lead, protect, and build communities in peace, just as they did in war. Because after the uniform is folded, the story doesn't close. It simply turns the page. Let's keep reading it together. Once, soldiers marched in rows. Now, they deploy with laptops and satellite links. The tools have changed, but the heart of service remains the same. Today's veterans might be drone pilots, cybersecurity analysts, medics, engineers. Their battlefields aren't always visible, but their impact is just as real. Veterans Day honors not only the warriors of the past, but those serving quietly, skillfully, and often unseen in the present. Today's armed forces are more diverse than ever before. Different cultures, backgrounds, genders, and stories, serving together under one flag. Each brings unique strength. Each adds a verse to the story of service. Veterans Day is a chance to recognize this richness, to see not just the uniform, but the person inside it. Because when we honor our veterans, we honor America's living mosaic. Not every act of service makes headlines. There are missions kept quiet. Acts of courage no one will ever read about. Humanitarian work, rescue operations, cyber defense, intelligence, invisible service, but deeply felt. Veterans Day is a time to say, we may not know the details, but we see the weight you carried, and we thank you for every unseen act that protected others. They've flown planes, commanded ships, led battalions. They've worked in the shadows and on the front lines. Women have long been part of the armed forces, often without the recognition they deserve. Their service is bold, brilliant, and essential. Veterans Day is a time to say clearly, we see you, we thank you, we honor your strength. For too long, many served in silence, afraid to speak, afraid to be seen. But still, they served. With courage, with integrity, with a love for their country that asked for nothing in return. Veterans Day is a moment to honor all who wore the uniform, including those whose stories were hidden for far too long. Some battles are fought without weapons: depression, anxiety, PTSD. These wounds don't bleed, but they ache, they limit, they haunt. And yet, veterans rise. They push forward. They rebuild. On Veterans Day, we must widen the frame of valor to include the brave hearts fighting battles no one else can see. A modern soldier may carry more data than ammo. They rely on satellites, sensors, and secure communications. Technology amplifies awareness, but it also brings complexity, information overload, constant connection. Yet, even with all this, it is still the human behind the screen who makes the call. Veterans Day reminds us, no matter how advanced the gear, it is still courage that drives it. Behind every service member is a network, partners, children, parents, friends. They manage the home, carry the worry, hold things together when duty calls someone away. Their strength is quiet but unshakable. On Veterans Day, we also honor those who never wore the uniform, but who served in their own way every single day. Even in a changing world, some values stay the same. Duty, honor, sacrifice. These are not outdated. They are eternal. Today's service may look different, but its foundation is old as time. Veterans Day is a bridge across generations, linking the warrior's heart, whether clothed in bronze armor or modern fatigues, because the spirit of service never ages. Do you know someone who served? Maybe a friend, a grandparent, a neighbor who never talks about it. Take a moment to share their story in the comments. Or simply type their name. One name, one memory. Because on Veterans Day, remembering becomes an act of honor, and every story shared adds another thread to the fabric of gratitude. Veterans are not just remembered, they are followed. By young people who feel the call, by families who serve again, by communities that learn and grow from their example. Legacy is not a statue, it's a motion, a continuation. On Veterans Day, we don't just look back, we look forward. And we walk with the same quiet courage, step by step. Modern service is a reflection of modern values, adaptable, diverse, devoted. In the next chapter, we'll explore what Veterans Day means today. Not just in ceremonies, but in classrooms, in workplaces, in the quiet moments where remembrance lives. Because meaning evolves, but honor endures. Let's follow that thread into the heart of the present. It's a date we see every year, November 11th, marked in red, a federal holiday, a pause. But what does it mean today? For some, it's a day off. For others, a day of memory. And for veterans, it's a complex moment of pride, of pain, of being seen. Veterans Day is more than a square on a calendar. It is a mirror. It reflects who we are and how we honor those who served. Across towns and cities, ceremonies begin. Flags rise, bugles play. Silence falls. Names are read aloud. Flowers are laid. Old hands salute. Each ritual may seem small, but together they hold meaning. Because these acts say what words sometimes can't. We remember. We care. We still carry the flame. In a quiet schoolroom, hands go up. "What's a veteran?" a child asks. And the answers come. Stories told by teachers, visits from local heroes, letters written in crayon and care. Veterans Day becomes a lesson not just in history, but in humanity. Because remembrance begins when understanding begins. And each child who learns the meaning of service carries it forward into the future. Not all tributes are parades. Some happen in quiet corners of break rooms and morning meetings. Veterans stand among us, not always in uniform, but always shaped by their service. Colleagues pause. Supervisors say thanks. Co-workers listen. On Veterans Day, respect isn't just symbolic. It becomes personal. A handshake, a story, a seat at the table where sacrifice is acknowledged. If this story has helped you see Veterans Day in a new light, subscribe, not just to this channel, but to the idea that remembrance is a living act. Subscribing means joining a journey of memory, of meaning, of walking slowly through the moments that shaped our world. This is a place for the quiet stories, and we'd be honored to walk with you again. Sometimes meaning is found in a look, a gesture, a moment of stillness. A veteran sitting alone at a diner, approached by a stranger who simply says, "Thank you." No banners, no speeches, just human recognition. On Veterans Day, the greatest honors aren't always carved in stone. They're spoken gently and felt deeply. In the age of screens, remembrance has gone online. Social media feeds fill with photos, faded black and whites, proud salutes, folded flags. Hashtags carry stories across time zones. It's a new form of memory. Global, instant, alive. On Veterans Day, even a single post becomes a tribute, a ripple of gratitude in the digital world. Some heroes walk on 4 legs. Dogs who comfort, guide, protect. They've walked into danger, stood by the wounded, sat quietly in hospital rooms. To many veterans, they are lifelines, not pets. On Veterans Day, we remember not just those who wore the uniform, but those who walked beside them, silent and loyal. Veterans Day isn't just a holiday. It's a living tradition. It shifts with time. It grows with every new story, every new veteran. From parades to podcasts, from silent moments to loud applause, it evolves. But at its core, it remains a promise. We will not forget. We will remember you. In the space below, leave a name, a memory, a word of thanks. Use the comments not just to talk, but to honor. Because sometimes the smallest gestures, typing a sentence, clicking post, can echo louder than we imagine. This day lives not in monuments, but in voices. Yours matters. A grandfather tells a story. A mother places a medal on a shelf. A child listens and remembers. This is how the meaning of Veterans Day is passed on, not only in classrooms, but in kitchens and living rooms, in silence, in laughter, in tears. It becomes a family tradition, not one of food or gifts, but of memory. We've walked through history and memory, from armistice to modern service, from silent tributes to shared stories. But this story is not yet done. In the final chapter, we'll pause, together, to breathe, reflect, and remember. Because in honor, we find peace. And in remembrance, we find each other. The music softens, the lights dim. We've traveled far, through trenches and parades, through tears and tributes. Now we pause. Not to end the story, but to let it rest. Because remembrance is not loud, it is quiet. It breathes between words. It waits in stillness. Let us honor that silence. If this journey touched even a quiet part of you, leave a like, not for the algorithm, but for the memory. Each click becomes a candle. Each one says, I remember, and together our lights can stretch far into the dark, saying what words cannot. There are names we whisper, names written on walls, tucked in drawers, etched in memory. Some are famous, most are not, but all of them matter. Veterans Day is not about war. It is about people, and every name we hold is a story we carry. And now, as the day ends, may peace settle over you. May the stories echo gently in your mind. May your dreams carry the courage of those who came before. Sleep well, and when you wake, remember, in honor, in light, in silence, we carry them still.